Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Mrs. Seidel. If you don't know who I am, you don't have me in class. Today, I am going to share with you a little bit about the labor movement and labor unrest during the time of industrialization, during the mid to late 1800s. So we'll be talking about this today. First thing, make sure from your note guide that you've done the warm-up. Hopefully you already did this before you started our notes today. Again, this is about the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, factory fire. And again, hopefully this gave you some good context and some good reasons why people felt there was this need for change and for labor to have more of a say and more control over working conditions and other things. So some of the reasons why there's is this labor movement during industrialization is that working conditions were not great. Most people worked 12 or more hours a day, at least 6 days a week. You had no vacation, no sick leave, no unemployment or injury payment. You got hurt on the job. There's no workers' comp, right? So you got hurt on the job. And if you weren't able to go to your job the next day, you lost your job. If you were sick or someone at home was sick and you couldn't work, again, you lost your job. There was no protections. Injuries were pretty common. For example, in 1882, an average of 675 laborers were killed each week on the job. A lot of this is due to not having enough safety standards at their jobs. Most factories and other working places like mines were very dirty, very, very poorly lit. People were paid very low wages. All people, women and children, even lower wages. And there was rampant child labor. Most people did not. Children had the opportunity for education. A lot of them were working at a very young age. And workers did not have a say to be able to change any of this. Some early labor organizations. The NLU was the first large-scale national organization of laborers. Again, we go over kind of these early organizations just to give you an idea of the types of ways people were organizing and what they were organizing for. One thing that the National Labor Union, one of their successes was in 1868. Congress did pass an 8-hour workday for just government workers, but again, it was for people who worked in the government, so that seemed to be a move in the right direction. In 1869, the Noble Order of the Knights of Labor was created. This is the first labor union that was open to everyone. People could join regardless of race, gender, their skill level. They really focused on individual workers, saying if one worker is affected by this, it affects all of us. They were again focused on the 8-hour workday, equal pay for equal work, something that we still hear today in our country, right? This idea of that equal pay for men and women. Another really well-known early labor organization was the AFL, or the American Federation of Labor. This had the president of Samuel Gompers in 1886. They're going to be really focused on collective bargaining, this idea of negotiating where both sides, that's both the workers as well as the company, get together, negotiate, and come up with a plan together. They were able to kind of focus on wages, hours, working conditions. They also really focus on a tactic by using strikes. And again, using strikes to get higher wages and shorter work weeks. So those were the types of things that workers were really trying to get during this time. We do see at this time a lot of different strikes and oftentimes a lot of violence associated with the labor movement and with labor unrest. This is something that you were supposed to be thinking about with your homework, right? Is the industry, or how are companies, businesses, and the government, how are they reacting to unions? And what we're going to see is through these different examples that for the most part, the government is going to be backing the companies. They're not backing workers at this time. So one example is the Haymarket Affair. This was in 1886. They were protesting police brutality. This was in Chicago. The crowd was actually dispersing, about 3,000 people. The crowd was dispersing and a bomb was thrown into the crowd. No one really knows exactly who threw this bomb in, but it led to pretty much a riot erupting. 7 police officers and several workers were killed. And this is a really important thing because the public starts to associate violence with the labor movement. And so again, the public isn't really supporting the labor movement because of what they saw at the Haymarket Affair in, again, Haymarket Square in Chicago. Another well-known strike is the Homestead strike in Carnegie Steel Company. I do ask you to pause your notes right now and go ahead, and the link is in your notes. Go ahead and watch about the Homestead strike. and then you can return and finish up your notes. All right, so hopefully you watched about the Homestead strike. Again, this is Carnegie Steel Company, right? So again, this is associated with Carnegie, who we've been learning a lot about. Wages had been cut. Workers were not happy about their wages being cut. Pinkerton detectives hired strikebreakers, which again, I often call them scabs, to come in and work for those who were on strike. Things turned violent, and actually the Pennsylvania National Guard is actually sent in to break up the Homestead strike. The Pullman Company strike happens in 1894. Again, what had happened was workers' wages, workers were cut, workers were laid off, rents were increased. Like they were living in a company town. They were living in Pullman's company town, and their rents were increased. And things become violent. And the president at the time, President Cleveland, ends up sending in federal troops to break up. And again, most of the strikers are fired, or the railroad blacklist a lot of the workers, which means that if you are blacklisted, it means you can't get a job in the railroad industry, which most of those workers is what their skill level was at. So you're pretty much making it that they can't get another job. So you can see from the Homestead strike as well as the Pullman Company strike that, again, the government, both state and federal governments, right, are protecting the company's interest and not supporting the workers, right, who are striking, looking for better conditions, better work wages, and things like that. To finish up our discussion today, we do want to talk about the Sherman Antitrust Act. This was passed in 1890, and it's the first federal act that outlaws business practices that create monopolies. So this is supposed to, for example, break up those trusts that created Standard Oil. So we talked about, right, one of the ways that Rockefeller made all this money was that he created trust, right, to control most of the oil, right, 90% of the oil in the United States. Again, this causes a monopoly. And the Sherman Antitrust Act was supposed to stop those unfair practices. It was supposed to allow more competition, more free market. Instead, what's really interesting is this first version of the Sherman Antitrust Act, instead, the federal government's going to use it to actually go against labor unions. The federal government is going to say that unions have a monopoly on labor, that they have control of labor. And so they use the Sherman Antitrust Act to actually go against labor unions. They want to outlaw collective bargaining, and they want to outlaw that idea that workers have some of a say in what the benefits are, and what gets decided, right, between a company and its workers. They want to get rid of that and give all that control instead just to companies. So you can really see from the Sherman Antitrust Act, from our different examples of businesses, right, and these different examples of how businesses react to strikes, the Homestead strike, right, the Pullman strike, you can see that the federal government is really on the side of business at this time, right? They're not on the side of workers, of laborers. Laborers really still do not have a lot of say. They don't have a lot of control over the type of situations they're in. And again, many of them are in very dangerous situations of where they work. They don't have really much say over what they're making wage-wise. They're working very long hours in dangerous conditions, and we're going to kind of pretty much continue to see that throughout the 1800s from the federal government, again, supporting companies and not workers. So thanks for joining me. Hope you learned and got, again, some more information about labor and the labor unrest and labor movement during the late 1800s during industrialization. Hope everybody has a great day.